Hello, everyone. Welcome to our spring webinar series. Today's webinar is on bringing the power of parks home, park programming in the days of social distancing. My name is Stephanie Stanov. I'm a program coordinator here at Park People, and I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar. A few notes to start with: if you're having any technical issues or any trouble seeing or hearing our presenters today, please let us know by using the chat function, which is an icon that appears at the bottom of your Zoom window. So we're going to be asking a bunch of questions in the chat box throughout the webinar, and you're always welcome to make comments there too. At the end of the webinar, we're going to be using the Q&A function to host our question and answer session. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll send that along to registrants after the webinar is complete, probably later next week. And we'll send a bunch of links as well that we're going to be sharing throughout this webinar. So don't feel stressed if you want all those links. You don't need to frantically copy and paste them. We'll make sure you get those in the follow-up email. And if you haven't done so already, we'd like to see where everyone is joining us from today. So please use the chat window and let us know where you're joining us from, your city, and your organization. Currently, we have about 150 people on the webinar. We see a bunch of people from Nova Scotia, got some folks from Ottawa, Dartmouth, someone all the way from UK. That's great to see. Welcome, everyone. So for those of you who are new to Park People as an organization, Park People helps to activate the power of parks to improve quality of life in cities across Canada. Our national network program provides comprehensive support to grassroots community groups, nonprofit organizations, and municipal staff across the country that are working to animate and enhance their local parks. Our national network supports over 800 community groups and is the only network in the country dedicated to helping people improve city parks. Programs like this webinar series aim to provide groups and organizations like yours with the tools and inspiration you need to animate and improve your city's parks. So we're keen to hear what you're up to, so please feel free to share links about projects that you're working on in the chat window. We'd love to see what you guys are up to. Okay, on to the next slide. So we have two inspiring panelists on the line today to share how they've been adjusting to their programming and responding to COVID in their communities. First off, we have Mary Caroline Badjeck, who heads up youth and environment projects with the Overbrook Community Association, a wonderfully motivated and dedicated community group in Ottawa. We also have Hussein Jan Mohammed, the artistic director of Iftar Nights with Toronto's MABELLEarts. For those of you who are familiar with Leah Houston, artistic director of MABELLEarts, who was originally scheduled to speak, she unfortunately had a family emergency and was unable to join us today. So we're grateful that Hussein was able to join us on such short notice. So thank you for that. Thank you to both of you for taking time away from all the important things that you're working on right now to share your experiences with our network. Just before we get started, we want to recognize how hard it's been for all of you to rethink all of the work and programs that you've been developing for years. And we just want to check in and see how you're feeling. So you're going to see a poll launch on your page in just a second. I'm just launching it now. So feel free to share how you're feeling about your park related work at the moment. It's anonymous, so feel free to be honest about this. We want to know, are you feeling distressed and challenged, confused? Is it the same as always? Or are you actually feeling inspired and motivated? Now I'm going to pass it over to our moderator, Kelsey Carrier, Senior Project Manager at Park People, and she's going to get us started with today's webinar. I think you're on mute, Kelsey.
Thank you, everyone. Unmuting always helps. And thank you all for taking the time to join us this afternoon. We have a bundle of great stories to share with you and ideas from all across our national network, from members like yourselves who have not let physical distancing impede their ability to connect with people in their community, provide cultural programming, environmental education, and respond directly to their community's needs. We recognize that we're coming together today under very unprecedented circumstances, and we want to thank you all for everything you're doing to keep yourselves and your communities safe and healthy. During this time, we've seen an appreciation and need for our parks like never before. And we all know how important nature is and what an important role it plays in improving our health and well-being, especially in times of crisis. We see many of you are feeling challenged, confused about the role of your work right now. So thank you for sharing that. And we have a ton of inspiration coming your way, and I'm glad some of you are already feeling that way. We do want our city parks to continue to provide respite during these difficult times, but only if they're being used responsibly and people are adhering to public health recommendations. We also acknowledge that we are all affected by these difficult times differently, and that regulations are different from province to province and continue to evolve daily. So we want to know what's going on in your city. So in the chat window, if you want to take a moment and write your city, the name of your city, and give us a snapshot of what's open or closed in your community. Are the trails and parks open or closed? What about community gardens? Are there any traffic lanes that have been reallocated to cycling and pedestrians? How's this working in your community? So feel free to jot a quick note with your city in our chat window there. So a couple of weeks ago, we reached out to our national network with a survey just to get a sense of how you're doing with the challenges during this time. We heard back from over 120 of you, so thank you so much. Of course, there's a lot going on at a time like this, including concerns around ongoing funding, safety and well-being, the role of your organization under shifting circumstances. But the two challenges that bubbled to the surface in your responses were about how to move programming online and the need for inspiring ideas to keep your communities engaged and connected and cared for. So we're very happy to bring you a whole slew of inspiring ideas from across our network to share, scale, replicate, or transform and make your own. We also had a draw of the survey respondents, and we're happy to announce the winner was 416 Love, a wonderful community organization from Toronto, and we'll be making a donation on their behalf to a frontline organization working on COVID response. So to begin with the question of moving programming online, we wanted to acknowledge that there are, of course, dozens of ways to do this. Zoom, as we're experiencing today, has great functionality for hosting meetings. You can even have breakout rooms to replicate workshop tables or committee meetings or even a house party. It can be used to conduct community engagement, to host online concerts and storytelling. You can explore nature with a guide or play trivia and other games. But in the rush to get everything online, it can be really easy to make assumptions about people's access to technology, and having to rethink our decisions about how to connect with people helps us crystallize our approach and ask the right questions to ensure that we're reaching our intended audience. People may simply not have devices or data plans, or they're overwhelmed by the learning curve. We've noticed, for example, people making great use of existing Facebook networks, using video and chat to share the programming online through Facebook. We've also noticed WhatsApp can be a super accessible format for lots of people. Many people have it on their phones to provide free long distance to stay connected. So it's easy for people to jump on and navigate to create groups. We've even seen community development officers and city councilors using WhatsApp as their go-to for sharing information. So we won't use our time together today to get into the specifics of all these different platforms, but what we did want to share with you, and Steph will put the link here in the chat box, and we'll of course share it after the webinar as well, is one really great one-stop resource that was put together by TechSoup. It's a Canadian nonprofit tech company that discusses the pros and cons of all the different platforms, different ways they're helpful, links to get you set up with a whole bunch of ranges of options and really simple tutorials, and also tips on how to best use them to hold inclusive and productive meetings. So feel free to check that out after the webinar if you need support getting on the right platform. So I know a lot of us work directly with getting people in touch with nature. it's the basis of a lot of our work, and this can be something that can seem pretty counterintuitive to try to accomplish online. But what we've seen great examples of dozens of different groups using virtual tools or something as simple as sidewalk chalk to help us fill our nature deficit. So people are going out for walks and talking with friends in other cities, also experiencing nature in different places and sharing their experiences. We've got people that can get out walking and sharing signs of spring and great nature moments through videos with other people that can't get out safely. We've seen scavenger hunts, getting families out turning over rocks and searching among the weeds for interesting species, rebel botanists turning our sidewalks into museums, and little libraries turning into seed and plant exchanges. So absence seems to have made the heart grow fonder as we see a renewed interest in connecting with nature. iNaturalist is a great tool we wanted to bring to your attention for those of you working on connecting people with nature. It encourages people to observe and document what's happening in the natural world right around their homes. And it turns everyone into a citizen scientist. And contributing can be as simple as noting when the first dandelion blooms on your yard, or snapping a photo of an unidentified bug, and then sending it in to iNaturalist, and all of this aggregated data from over 1 million everyday citizens helps contribute to knowledge of biologists, helps them understand the impacts of climate change and track species at risk. So speaking of great activities to encourage curious minds of all ages, I would like to introduce you now to Marie-Caroline of the Overbrook Community Association in Ottawa, who always does amazing work, creative work themselves, and also amplifying other community projects around them. But they've really kicked it up in their efforts during COVID, supporting youth and seniors, providing online fitness classes, organizing volunteers to deliver necessities, hosting dance parties, writing collaborative poetry, and even helping folks deal with not being able to get out to the salon or hairdresser. So they've been a remarkable example, and we're honored to have Caroline with us today. They even collaborated with 7 different organizations to create Ottawa Cares to pool resources to specifically address the urgent needs of people in each of their direct communities. So let me pass the floor over to Marie-Caroline.
Hi, thank you, Kelsey, and hi, everybody. I just want to potentially introduce my a fellow panelist in the back, my 4-year-old son. So if you hear some background noise and screaming, I apologize in advance. Hopefully he's occupied enough that he won't interrupt me. And again, Kelsey, thank you for introducing the work of OCA in such a wonderful way. I want to start by saying that I'm only representing here the effort of all of my colleagues and volunteers. I'm a volunteer myself, and I know part of the struggle when we all have a family life and work is how do we keep involved in such a crisis and helping our community and our park group. So I just want to acknowledge that I'm speaking today, but there's a lot of people standing behind me and hopefully watching also. In terms of Overbrook Community Association, so we're in Ottawa, we're in the East End. We're a mixed neighborhood, so we have the luxury of having a beautiful parks by the river. We're gentrifying, so we do have different socioeconomic levels. Our community association is quite active, and the structure is in place. Sorry. And so what has been happening since previous to COVID is we've been developing our social media space. So we have a social media lead, Marjolaine Provost, and we've been revamping our Facebook page as well as our Twitter. And when COVID started, for me it was March 16 when schools were closed. Suddenly our social media really was kicking up. We noticed there was a lot of activity and people trying to interacting with posts. So we decided to post as much as we could in terms of news from the city, from our counselor, but we also realized that people wanted information directly related to our neighborhood, not just about official messaging citywide or federal, provincial wide. And what was amazing is that people reached out to us. So that's my message today, is that don't think you need to come up with all the ideas yourself. As a community association, what we do is we amplify the wonderful work of other people. So a lot of what I'm going to present today is not actually something that I designed or came up with. So first of all, one of our community members, Jill Payback, she reached out to us and said, could we do a window walk? And she sent the information to us. And basically a window walk is that every 2 to 3 days, there was a new theme. For example, animals, jokes, positive affirmations, sayings, for a period of 2 weeks. And the neighborhood was encouraged to basically decorate their windows based on those themes. And those posts were one of the most popular in our history of our social media Facebook page. Received a lot of likes, interaction, and all the pictures that are on our social media page were actually sent by community member. So this is an example really of, it's a community member that reached out to us, and we just basically used the platform we already had to implement their idea. And one of the things for me that was really nice is when we had the team of positive affirmation, I would be walking around our neighborhood, and then somebody, one of the neighbors, wrote this huge sign that said, do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better, from Maya Angelou. And so it's so nice to walk in the neighborhood and have all those positive affirmations popping up on windows and encouraging neighbor. And that's how you create a community of care. Another good example that I want to talk to you about today is MABELLEarts. So MABELLEarts is somebody we worked with last year through our TD Park grant. So thank you, TD Park. He's a head coach at La Cité and really involved in our community. And he recently applied for a small grant for something that is called Quarantine Natural Care. And it's basically catered to a racialized community on how to deal with natural hair. So here, like good example here, but you don't have a hairdresser, it can be a bit complicated. And so he's going to be doing with his sister actually an online tutorial to help youth in our community to develop their own natural care for hair and also for skin. And so this is not an OCA project per se, like he did not apply for funding through us. However, we reached out to him and said, hey, like your project is really interesting. It's in our community. You live in our neighborhood. We want to help you to make sure that everybody knows about it. So again, the way we operate right now in the Overbrook Community Association is that we really try to reach out to community members with whom we have interacted before. So for example, MABELLEarts to the TD Park grant, or a community member reach out to us. And our objective is to amplify their amazing work and engage our community. So I don't know if you want me to add something else, Kelsey, but I think my main message here is use the infrastructure you have as a community association to reach out to others in the community and tell them you're here to help implement their idea. And if you're not part of a community association and you have ideas, reach out to them. You'll be amazed. As a community association, we have board meetings like on Zoom and online thinking, what are we going to do for this crisis? And when a community member comes in and says, I have an idea, we're more than happy to be able to implement it.
This is amazing, Marie-Caroline. Thank you so much. Maybe before we jump back into the rest of the presentation, I could get you to speak a little bit about the development of Ottawa Cares and how you sort of are connected and share resources in that way as well.
Yes. So there's actually two little projects. So the first one, Ottawa Cares, as you mentioned, is 7 community association in Ward 13 in Overbrook. They include Manor Park, Rockcliffe, Lindley, Vanier, and Overbrook, and others. And basically, those associations came together to make sure that we could do volunteer intake in one centralized place, as well as have a volunteer intake protocol. Of course, there's health and safety issues, and especially, for example, if you're delivering food, to make sure that we had consistent protocol across our community association, guided by public health, especially City of Ottawa Public Health. So I think it's a really neat initiative, and our president, Heather Amos, was really central in bringing our association into that fold. And I think that's maybe also the other message, is that as a community association, we have our president that really works a lot to coordinate with other community association and to make sure that we talk to each other. But at the same time, you have people like me who are more focused on specific project and making things happen on the ground. And I think that's great. That's what you need, is look at your own strength as a volunteer and see where you can best apply them. So that's for Ottawa Cares, and it's going to be a website intake. But also in Overbrook, a wonderful volunteer, Danica Brisson, she put together Overbrook Cares. Benjamin, come. So somebody's having a little tantrum. So maybe I can talk about Overbrook parents after. I want to look at your bed.
Kelsey, I think you're on mute again.
Thank you so much, Marie Caroline. And it's really interesting to see like how important it is to have sort of a spectrum of focus, part of your group focused on connecting with other organizations, and other parts of your organization connected, like really focused on connecting on the ground with projects and people directly in your community. So that's just a wonderful segue for what we wanted to share with you next about just how difficult it can be to have to suddenly change the way that you respond to your community, and projects and that you have developed over years and ways of working that you've developed are suddenly not possible. In fact, according to our survey, almost 70% of our park group's activities are on hold at the moment. But this is a great time to take stock of what you or your organization have to share outside of your in-person programming. So perhaps it's a great story, perhaps it's expertise in a particular field. This is a great time to compile your stories, to interview longtime members, to review your successes or challenges and reflect on this experience and find a fun platform to share it. So these could all be the makings of a great webinar. Perhaps you have musicians in your community who would like to spearhead social distance concerts, or maybe you have a great resource of volunteers that you could redirect to more immediate community needs. Maybe there's an artist on your board that could help bring joy to a public space with their art. Or maybe you've got great organizational skills and you're the one to schedule access to recently reopened community gardens to make sure that that's done safely. So whatever your skills are, these are all incredibly helpful to keeping the wheels turning in our community work at this time. So one of our survey respondents are friends from Calgary, the Friends of Fish Creek. They also generally focus on getting people out in nature together. And they had recently done a survey with their participants where they learned that people who are involved in their organization derive great benefits from their involvement, connecting with each other, connecting with nature, getting a sense of purpose, meaning, and joy. And some even said it's the reason for getting out of bed in the morning. So in making the transition to working during the times of social distancing, they knew they really needed to focus on keeping people connected, and they declared their goal to continue engaging their community and to foster mental health and community connectivity. Of online work, including speaker series, meditation webinars, and they're even exploring other ways to connect with park users through a story mapping technology. So with that great example in mind, I'd like to introduce you to our second speaker today, Hussein Jan Mohammed, who's the artistic director of the Iftar Nights. It was produced by MABELLEarts, and talking about moving their beloved Ramadan festival online. So there'll just be a brief transition while I stop sharing, and we'll let Hussein take over the screen. So you should have screen share just at the bottom there. Excellent. And perfect.
Super duper. Thank you so much, Kelsey and Stephanie and everyone there for having me this afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be speaking in a very small way to the amazing work of MABELLEarts, which is led by the artistic director, Leah Houston. It's an honor for me, and I want to also acknowledge that what I'll be sharing is only my experience, a small part of a much bigger effort by many, many community organizers, artists, community members, and people who care compassionately about supporting communities to flourish. So I'm really grateful to be here to share with you a little bit about the story of how we've taken one project, which is which was our MABELLEarts Iftar nights, and converted it into a virtual Iftar night project. I just wanted to also highlight that with MABELLEarts, their value system relies so much on the care of the community and building solid long-term relationships with community members to revitalize public spaces, including parks, and using the arts as an engagement pathway to share stories, to create new stories, and to revitalize the communities in which we live. And it's been a real pleasure for me to be part of that value system. The Iftar Nights is one of the major projects that MABELLEarts hosts and has been doing for over 10 years. The communities in which MABELL works come from many places of the Muslim world, including Bangladesh, many countries in East Africa, Saudi Arabia, the Levant region, and many other places in the world. Also, their communities include people from European descent and other parts of the world. There are also in the community many vulnerable members who need extra support. So about 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, because of a desire of some artists in the community, as well as the women in the community, to share the spirit of Ramadan, the spirit of love, generosity, and kindness, gratitude with their neighbors, Iftar Nights blossomed. And over the last 10 years, they've been gradually building out this wonderful event that happens once a week during the month of Ramadan in the evening before sunset, and is a public gathering of community and friends and families to prepare and bring our collective heart into readiness to break the fast, which is called Iftar, fast breaking during the month of Ramadan. And I would love to show a video of a little video to give you an example of what the event looks like. I just wanted to double check, Kelsey, do you see the virtual Iftar Nights screen?
We're just seeing the Iftar Nights poster with the lantern.
I see. Okay, so excuse me as I thought I had this, but I will just exit out of this and bring up the virtual Iftar Nights. Sorry for the technical. Here we go. Great, super. So here's a little video, the virtual Iftar Nights, and I'll tell you more about that in a second. But this is what the community event feels and looks like.
What a beautiful thing to see a lot of kids and families coming from different places from around the world, and they all gather here for Iftar. And also there is a lot of art, and it just does exactly what we need, like in a time where there is, Ramadan, and it's a holy month for Muslim, and also because most of the refugees, they're coming from a hardship place, like different part of the Muslim world, and just to be part of this is a joy for me.
I do love this community so much and the people around, and it is so fabulous and intriguing.
So you have a little bit of a sense of the spirit of that festival. I was lucky to be brought on about 4 or 5 years ago to participate in a musical way, reciting the call to prayer at the event. The event had an arc, which was welcoming. There was a lot of small art activities, music happening. The Gather Round Singers, led by Shifra Cooper, was always a feature of the event. Turquoise, Mariam Toller's group. and many other musicians and artists were involved. So we would have a gathering, there would be a procession, then there would be a moment of contemplation, a call to prayer, and then the breaking of the fast, followed by fireplace singing and storytelling. So you can really get a sense that this was a magical night as the sun went down and the sparkle of the lanterns came up. It really was a beautiful, magical event. And every time I came home from it, I felt like I had just been transported into another world. And then, of course, with the onset of the pandemic, everything stopped. And there was a desire to continue and find a way to bring this community gathering into a virtual space. And there was born virtual iftar nights. As part of the COVID response, if I can use that term, Mabel immediately started calling every day their 90 plus families to who they've built long-term relationships with to find out how they were doing, what support they needed. And in the process, they found that there were many families and individuals who were not able to get the necessary provisions. So they started some work with local partners to deliver food once a week to these families. And they've continued since then daily calls. There's a group of youth volunteers who they work with and staff who are constantly in touch with the community to build that relationship and strengthen what they need right now. And that was an emergency response on the ground level. And as an arts organization, there was a desire also to have a response on the artistic level. And so we went from what would be a live event to now an event that would be online. And this has been so super. Artistic producer Shifra Cooper has been, and a team of fabulous artists and organizers have come together. You saw in the video I just played some shadow puppetry. You saw Waleed, one of our musicians. You saw how the community comes together, the singing. You heard the voice of Mariam Toller. And so that project grew out of this. And we worked with community members in the Maybelle Park area and Aga Khan Museum area for them to retell their stories and memories of Ramadan through art and music. And those materials then we worked with and developed into a beautiful podcast that Kristen Kong, our podcast director, designed with music by all the different artists that we gathered virtually, from sending tracks and asking people to record from their homes. We've got a beautiful singing from different choral singers, choral groups, as well as musicians from Iran, from the Arab world, from East Africa, from India, and other parts of the world as well. And so I'd love to show you a little bit and then tell you a little bit about how we've been able to address the needs of people without access to technology. So this is one example of our podcasts. The podcasts are released twice a week. So this Monday was the 3rd, and it reflects the idea of gathering. That was such an important part of the iftar.
Gather round, let's give our thanks.
At first, when people start gathering, it's kind of quiet. You hear the music in the background. It's really peaceful.
Iftar Nights at Maple is more than a celebration in the park. This is the community that I grew up in. I was able to share my life story in Maple Park. Someone knew me and wanted to hear what I had to say.
It's like what we did back home, sharing each other's gratitude, and it brings the happiness that's associated with Ramadan. It feels like we're bringing our communities with us from back home.
Maybelle Park awakens with community members assembling, sharing thanks and blessings.
The music, the bringing the tea, the thing.
Memories are made together when our thoughts are shared with one another.
So every time I see this, my heart just expands because it's so beautiful. Shadowland Theater has been producing the shadow puppetry based on illustrations by a wonderful artist, Banafshe Erfanian. And then Kristen Kong produced the podcast after collecting the stories. So we were able to really capture the feeling, I think, of the Iftar nights. One of the aspects of this is that we have the gather round singers that Shifra conducts, who don't all have access to technology. And so we've been trying to find ways for the choir to come together to feel that sense of being together in person, and also to contribute to the recordings of the videos and the audios. And so what Gather Round Singers has done is that they have a group of 5 artists who are part of the choir, and a group of young women, volunteers from the MABELLE community, who have been supporting the singers who don't have access to the technology that we have by phone calling and rehearsing parts on the phone. And then through the phone, recording the voices. And then those voices that are recorded become part of the audio tracks that we mix in with other singers. As well, when we have our Zoom rehearsals, we have Zoom small breakout groups in the virtual space. And as we rehearse, singers are encouraged to record their voices and send those recordings to us that we then remix into the choral version. So it's been so beautiful to hear and see all those voices. And it's been really neat because not only is it an intercultural experience where we're bringing sound and stories that are rooted in the Muslim world into a more neighborly context, in a Canadian context, but we're also finding ways to bridge digital sound with vocal acoustic sound, with sound that's recorded through a telephone, for example. And it's been this artistically and I would say heartfelt, motivational process that we've been able to find so gratefully ways in which the community can come together in this time. So that's a little bit about virtual iftar nights. The website is www.virtualiftarnights.ca. And we encourage you please to visit the website. As I mentioned, podcasts come out twice a week, as well as musical tracks. And on Wednesday evenings, we have live performances by some of the musicians who we've worked with, celebrated world-renowned musicians. Saturday is an interactive activity that you can do with your family. So hopefully many ways to participate. There's a lot of sharing of recipes from the women in the community. So this week's recipe was a lentil soup, which you must try. It's delicious. And so we're finding lots of different ways to just bring that taste and smell and touch and sound and feeling of iftar through a virtual space. And I really believe after doing this, that the intention, the energy of desiring to be unified with others and celebrate that vibration of gratitude, generosity, and love does and can be mediated through an online space with some deliberate and conscious choices about how to engage each other well. So
oh my gosh, Hussein,
I hope that gives you a little bit of insight, and I'll pass it back to you, Kelsey.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a delight to see exactly how all the different layers of your work, from the food to the song to the gathering. I'll get you to stop sharing your screen because then maybe it'll stop showing my voice in echo too. But yes, thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. And I'm so glad you brought up all of the work that that MABELLEarts is doing about drawing people online through the telephone, because it is so true. That's a perfect segue to our next note, is that you know, how often the most vulnerable vulnerable people in our communities are also the least connected online. And, you know, we're finding lots of people that don't speak English as a first language are not understanding the updates on the news, that they're extra concerned and extra frightened by the situation because, you know, they haven't been getting updates in their own language. So that's another role that we're seeing community groups playing in just making sure that their community members are connected. So back to the real world, after all this wonderful transition of bringing our art and music and stories online, we're already starting to see a little relaxing of restrictions and people are needing to get out. It does seem like we're going to have precautions in place for some time. So I just wanted to share with you a whole slew of exciting activities and ideas that we're seeing across the country to really keep our neighborhoods and communities connected while we're physical distancing. So we're seeing, for example, scavenger hunts pop up to create shared experiences along people's streets, sharing unique secrets of individual neighborhoods. We're seeing little libraries being turned into food pantries to feed those in need, complete with sanitary hand wipes. And Steph is including in the chat bar there a set of best practices for how to use little libraries safely during this time. We're seeing Touchless seedling changes, both in conversations to arrange a touchless exchange, and also little libraries being used for this to share the bounty of our fledgling gardens safely. Our beloved spring cleanup traditions have, for the most part, been canceled, but we're seeing lots of groups delivering supplies to individuals so that solo or as families, they can do cleanups in their neighborhood and share their before and after pictures. As Marie-Caroline mentioned, we're seeing across the country this beautiful inspiration of window walks to spread joy. And we're also seeing people connecting from the street, sharing messages with each other to ensure community members that we're there for them, even though we may not be seeing each other on a daily basis and we might not yet be friends on Facebook. So Caroline had mentioned, and Hussein as well, delivering food to those in need. This has shown to be one of the greatest priorities for lots of communities without school food programs and, you know, with loss of family incomes and people not being able to get out to get groceries due to vulnerabilities or quarantining due to sickness. And we've seen lots of our park groups focus on this. Almost 40% of the network who responded to the survey said that they're now doing work outside their usual park work in response to COVID, doing things like delivering groceries and necessities. So we've also pasted in the chat window here a great set of guidelines compiled by the Friendly Neighborhood Hotline, Open Lab, and the University Health Network to safely purchase and deliver groceries, should your group want to get involved in that and be looking for some guidelines. And we've also, amid all of the restrictions and uncertainty, we've noticed how important it is to maintain and share positive messaging. So we see park departments focused on helping us spread out and explore the trails less traveled, and the Vancouver Park Board assuring us that it's the distance between us that holds us together. Ensemble pour nos parcs in Montreal, it reminds us that it's all of our jobs to act responsibly and ensure that our parks stay open safely. And before we jump in and open up the question and answer function for you guys to ask questions directly of our panelists here, we wanted to share with you one last wonderful example of bringing park programming out of our parks and right to the people. That we see, and I apologize for not sharing a video here. I have a bit of an unstable internet connection at my place, but Steph will share in the chat window the video that accompanies this image here. It's of Jami Esplanade and their Kesani hub of itinerant performances. So they've taken a trailer that was recently outfitted to be able to bring all their event materials into public spaces for their in-person events in parks, and converted it into a traveling stage with a battery-powered sound gear to bring a whole series of stunning concerts to people as they're closed in their apartments. So we're so happy to share all of the stories and great examples that we've heard about, and we certainly encourage you, and I know that a lot of you have already shared in the chat window, great examples, things that you're up to, things that you've heard out about and that have inspired you. So please do continue to populate the chat window with that. And with that said, we would actually like to switch over to the question period. So if you hover over the bottom of your video screen, you'll see an option for Q&A. So that's where we'll put questions that you would like to be brought up to Hussein and Marie-Caroline. And I'll also stay in the questions to respond to any questions. You'll also see that if someone else has a similar question to yours, you can give it a thumbs up, which will bring it to the top of the list and get it addressed quicker. You can also comment or add to other people's questions. And then I'll hand the floor over to Steph to bring your questions forward.
Great. So if everyone can go ahead and input any questions they have into the Q&A box. We're going to keep an eye on that and see what comes in and send the questions to Hussein and Marie-Caroline. So we have a question from Sharon Body. Is there supposed to be another webinar for funded groups? Do you know if that's been scheduled? So I think if you're referring to the TD Park People grants, then yes, there will be other webinars and more resources coming your way for that. And I think, Emma, that might answer your question as well.
Yeah, you'll be getting notification very shortly about specifically the TD Park People grants upcoming webinar.
Yeah, seeing a lot of questions about the TD Park People grants. Of course, that's definitely on everyone's mind right now. Naomi is asking more about the story mapping technology. Kelsey, do you know if there's more resources, or Hussein, more resources available?
So this is one that we heard about from our friends at the Friends of Fish Creek in Calgary. And I did notice, I can't keep a full eye on the chat window at the same time, but I did notice there was a little back and forth about there. So what we'll do is compile that information and include it with the resources when we follow up with you all next week with all these links in one place. Because I'm not super familiar with that myself, but it definitely sparked my interest too. And I noticed there's people in Toronto using it in different ways. To actually map out and gather and add some geography to people's stories.
Right.
May I answer a question from Tamara Romanchuk?
Sure.
She had a question, were virtual iftar nights created in response to COVID-19, or was this already a project that was being produced with podcast and video elements in mind? It definitely was a response to COVID-19, though there were online expressions in social media about the live event. It was definitely a dramatic pivot for us to move into the virtual, and it's been a really great learning experience and lots of new possibilities that we'll hopefully be able to weave into the regular programming in the future.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Judy. What do you find is the most effective way to reach and engage people outside of your direct membership to make them aware and draw them into your activities? Perhaps Marie-Caroline, did you want to address that one?
Yeah, I think a three-part answer. The first one, recently our social media lead, Marjolaine Provost, we, I think, invested $10 or $15 in a Facebook ad to make sure that we could reach a wider audience on Facebook. And in a few days, we got 60 more people that are now following our Overbrook Community Association. So we're 500, so that's a 10% increase in a few days. And I think, again, community members are really looking for more neighborhood information. You know, there's all the PM briefings every day, and then the premieres, but they're really wanting to know what's happening around my house so that I can kind of connect with my neighbors. So that's one thing we did. The other thing is that we do have a newspaper, and it's been we had it for quite a few years, a local newspaper produced by volunteers, and it became even more important during this crisis. Right now, the first delivery was done in collaboration with Post Canada so that we could kind of respect the social distancing, and also for our volunteers, you know, to avoid any contact with delivery. But the newspaper was really important because it's delivered to every member in our neighborhood, and it's a tool to connect with them. We provide phone numbers, but also games. For instance, we started, thanks again to another volunteer, crowdsourcing a poem. So the first two sentences of the poem are in the newspaper, and we're inviting people to share with us the rest of the poem. So that's through the newspaper, really important. But also the third thing is through, again, another volunteer, Danica Bisson, who put together this project with others called Overbrook Community Cares. And through flyers and the newspapers is providing a phone number as well as a Gmail. And the phone number was actually through a burner, so a cell phone they purchased at a really, really low price, to make sure that people who didn't have access to internet could contact these volunteers for anything related to food delivery, services, and then our volunteers can redirect them through city services or to other community association organization within our neighborhood. But also the fact that they know that there's members around their house in their community that really care, and they can reach out for anything from diapers to food to just being able to talk to somebody. So I think, again, it's making sure that we use social media quite a lot. I'm really excited about the work we do there. But we also use traditional means. The final thing I really, really want to mention is youth. Youth is so important. So it's just also to remember when you reach out and engage different groups is what do they need and what is the best way to engage. So again, we have this online tutorial about natural and hair care that one of our members, Manel Klual, is putting together. But the other thing that we're going to start is an Instagram page. But the person who's going to be managing that page is not me. It's going to be a youth. And then maybe we'll explore other things. Like, I don't know, maybe one day we'll have a TikTok or we'll be using Slack. I don't know. But it's just to remember also the target audience. And so we have elderly, we have newcomers, we have youth. So we really sit down and try to think on how to reach these different audiences with different needs. There's no blanket approach.
Great, thank you for that. We have another question here, which again might be a good one for Mary Caroline, as you have your son in the background there. Do you have any suggestions on how to balance activities that are kid-friendly, but also take into consideration the availability and busy schedules of parents and guardians working from home?
Can personally relate to that. So I work full-time with a toddler. So I would say, I mean, I personally enjoyed a lot the window walks, because what happens is that kids after a certain amount of time indoor need to be outside. And again, it's target audiences. So this is my experience, and I guess people around me, like in my neighborhood, that for toddlers and preschooler, engaging on screen is difficult sometimes, and the attention span is quite short. So things like window walk and nature walks are great. And then you have, teenagers. They might have, again, other ways to interact. It might be more social media friendly, but they're not on Facebook. So that's why we have to think of other platforms to use. So for young kids, I would say that definitely the window walk were a hit, because they not only help decorate the window, but then they're able to see them and spot them. And then they see their own art on Facebook. So I know my son was really proud to see what we did together on a social media page. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that would be my suggestions.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Hussein, for your insight on the iftar nights. Just keeping in mind the time, I think we'll wrap up here. I do see a lot of questions about the TD Park People grants, and that's great. I know that's on everyone's mind as we move forward. But we will be providing more information that will be coming early next week, so stay tuned for that. We will be having webinars, so you can ask more questions specifically about the TD Park People grants at that time. And I'm just going to pass it back to Kelsey.
All right, well, thank you all so much for your questions, and to our panelists for your insights. If you asked a question that we didn't get to, we will take a look at it and try to provide answers to that along with the webinar recording and the resources that we'll get to next week. And also do feel free to follow up by email if you have follow-up questions. So we just have a few resources that we want to share with you before we let you go. And we also just wanted to check back in to our first question to see how you're feeling now about your park work after getting a healthy dose of inspiration from Hussein and Marie Caroline, learning about logistics and perspectives. And I can see your answers coming in, and boy, is it a delight to see that we have managed to share some inspiration and motivation. So I'm so glad that you were all able to attend and share in this experience together. So before we part ways for the day, I just want to direct you to a whole bunch more great resources that we've got on the Park People website. there's dozens of sort of one-pager how-tos, all the way from guides to animating your park, to organizational planning resources. There's case studies, there's research papers, the whole spectrum. And Steph has included a link to those in the chat window, and we'll also share that again next week as well. Recognizing that after weeks of isolation, you may have volunteers chomping at the bit to help, or maybe you've seen something today that's inspired you and you want to reach out to your volunteers to get them motivated in an upcoming project. So we just had a webinar last week about creative volunteer engagement. Steph is sharing the link to that so you can watch the recording and get all fired up and excited about connecting with your volunteers again. And for those of you for whom it would be relevant, we also have coming up on Thursday another webinar that's part of our partnership series, where we'll be looking at what great partnerships look like and what you want to know before getting involved in one. So this webinar is also part of the Canada Parks and Rec Association Professional Development Credits. So we're super happy to have you tune in on that. And Steph is sharing the registration link in the chat bar as well. So we do want you to stay in touch. We put out a great monthly newsletter that's a bit of a roundup of all the great upcoming events and activities, news and resources that will help keep you connected to the park issues that you care about most. So you can use the link in the chat again to make sure you're signed up to receive it. We've also recently launched a fully bilingual national Facebook group, and we encourage you to join to keep connected with other park groups across the country. So we're also sharing that link. So do keep in touch and all the social media ways. You can also call us at Park People, just look us up on our website. And as you sign off, you'll be prompted to fill out a survey about today's webinar. So we encourage you to take just a quick moment to do so. As we review it, we take it seriously, and it helps us make our webinars even better and more responsive to you every time. So thank you for joining us, and do keep in touch. We're going to send you next week the recording of today's webinar with all of those resources that were in the chat window. And so thank you, all of you, for joining, to our presenters for sharing all of their amazing work and for inspiring us, to all of you for the amazing work that you do, keeping your communities connected and inspired and safe. And if you want to treat yourselves to that beautiful video of Jamie Esplanade's traveling concert, Steph's going to share the link in the chat window, one last link for you, and we'll let you be back to your day. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and thank you so much for connecting here.